Right, lads, so today we'll be looking at secondary economic activities in the Paris Basin. Remember, secondary economic activities in this region are going to be all based around manufacturing. Manufacturing is the taking of raw materials and turning them into finished products. Manufacturing here in this area, this region, is going to be very, very good. It's going to be very, very strong. You're going to have a mix of traditional types of manufacturing and modern and advanced types of manufacturing here. So we're going to be looking at the examples of manufacturing that take place here, and we're going to be looking at the factors that are going to impact it. So starting us off there today, and again, you'll just pause the video here to take down your notes, okay? So secondary economic activities. First of all, manufacturing is dominated by Paris, very similar to how Dublin dominates Ireland. Paris dominates manufacturing in the Paris Basin, indeed in France in general, okay? It is the industrial centre or heartland of France, not only the Paris Basin but France in general. Just in terms of manufacturing here, it is a high cost activity, and it has or does produce a lot of luxury items. Again, very similar in some respects to farming here. You know, a lot of the produce that comes from farms in the region is high value luxury items like your brie cheese, your camembert, your champagne, that sort of stuff, okay? Again, a lot of the manufacturing that takes place here is high cost. It costs a lot to make the goods and products. The wages are high, the rent is high, the cost for energy is high, and a lot of the items that they make are luxury items. So again, in that regard, you're looking at modern industries really. Okay, exports from this region alone account for 20% of France's total amount of exports in terms of manufacturing, so that's really, really high. What kind of things are they known for producing and exporting? Well, airplane parts, like from companies like Boeing, for example, car parts and cars themselves, Renault, Peugeot will be two French car manufacturing companies, and pharmaceuticals, in the making of drugs and medical devices similar to that we'd have here in Ireland. And a lot of these types of manufacturing are high cost, and they are they're modern, intensive types of manufacturing. They're advanced types of manufacturing. Again, in terms of other different kind of things, you know, in terms of airplane parts, you know, the aerospace and defence groups, you know, so Dassault, Airbus, Thales, they make parts for spaceships, they make parts for planes, they make parts for the militaries of Europe and the world, okay? Next up then we have some examples of I suppose cars and car parts. So Renault, Peugeot, I mentioned both of those, but you've all these other different companies here as well that make parts for cars that would be exported around the world. And then in terms of your pharmaceuticals, you know, AstraZeneca, GlaxoSmithKline, Eli Lilly, Pfizer, Roche, they're all found here in the Paris Basin. So again, modern, advanced types of manufacturing, okay? So what are the factors or the reasons why manufacturing is the way it is here? Well, number one and most important as always is transport. You know, the flat relief means access is really good here. The large market, the workforce, and the access to raw materials. That is what has made manufacturing in this core part of France and Europe extremely profitable and advanced. Okay, so we're going to go through this. First one is transportation, and again, you'll just pause your notes here once I have the slide up and you can take them down. So Paris, first of all, is very easily accessible. It's got flat lowland relief. It's in the very center of Western Europe. The River Seine, which flows through Paris, is navigable, which means it's got an inland port. You can bring boats up the River Seine as far as Paris, and it is the #1 river port in France. Okay, and it contains 6 container ports, so that means Paris is a very good location for assembly type manufacturing, car parts for example, whereby you might take in raw materials from elsewhere, put your parts together and send them off around the world market. So the container ports makes that really, really possible. Le Havre is the port at the mouth of the River Seine, and very good for importing the raw materials, especially heavy raw materials like oil. It's the focus of the French road and rail network. You know, the French rail network takes 10 million tons of cargo every year, and the road network takes 204 million tons. And the fact that you've got a radial road network and rail network means that all of the main roads and railways radiate out from Paris. It's the ideal location for the assembly type manufacturing of vehicles like Renault and Peugeot. And 90% of national air cargo is handled by the Gaulle airport, which is one of the main airports that you have in the Paris Basin. It is one of 3 international airports around Paris, but it is the biggest and largest. So again here, I'm going to bring it back here for a second. Oops. You can't go back, right? So next one up is our market. We've got a big consumer market, 21 million people living in the Paris Basin, extremely wealthy, looking for high-end luxury goods. And you know, the fact that you've got Paris at the center of Europe, you've got free trade, free movement of goods and products, over 500 million people in the market of Europe. So again, that would be our second one. You just embellish that out there. Next one then, in terms of workforce, really important. Paris is a large skilled workforce of about 11 million people. 20% of all manufacturing in France is located here. 85% of all research and development, so people here have to be young and educated and bright in order to be working in a lot of these modern factories. And you've got 17 universities. 40% of the adult population has a degree, and 26% of all students in France are found in Paris. So there's a big link between the high levels of education and the high levels of research and development. Research and development coming up with new goods and products. The fourth factor we have is our raw materials. We've got huge amounts of raw materials here. Farming here is really strong. So we have grains for bread, we have apples for cider, we have milk for cheese and yogurts. So a huge amount of traditional, you know, labor intensive type of industry here as well, because we've got the raw materials. Imports of heavy materials like timber and steel, oil, they come from former colonies of France. Oil, gas and nuclear power is how it will power a lot of its industry. Oil and gas, France has some reserves of its own, very small amounts of oil and gas, but by far and away France is, and indeed the Paris Basin, is mainly powered by nuclear power. Okay, so it's not overly reliant on importing it, but nuclear power would be a way in which it does power its industry. Okay. Just a little bit more on our raw materials here, because it is one of the an energy as a raw material. Oil is imported through Le Havre, so that means you've got oil refining and petrochemical industries around there. It's the 3rd greatest oil consuming country in Europe after Germany and Russia, and the 10th greatest in the world. And it has to import 95% of its oil needs. Gas, there's some found in the Languedoc region down in the south and southwest of France, but it does import gas from the Netherlands and Russia. Not so much obviously in modern context at the moment with the conflict we have going on. Nuclear power is by far and away the most efficient and important source of electricity. 10 power plants of nuclear variety are found in the Paris Basin, and 75% of all French electricity is generated this way. So they're not really reliant on importing oil and gas from other countries, which gives it a big advantage. And then in terms of hydroelectric power, there are 4 hydroelectric power stations in the Paris Basin that allow it to generate clean and renewable electricity. Just again, a couple of different types of industries that we find here. You know, some of these are traditional and labor intensive. You know, you're looking at things like the fashion industry. Chanel would be an example of a brand. Jewelry, Cartier, you know, cosmetics, L'Oreal. A lot of these companies are set up in a large business estate known as the Cosmetic Valley, and we'll talk about that again in a few minutes. Heavy industry or heavy engineering, you know, you're looking at things like car assembly, plane assembly, like Airbus, Boeing. You know, huge amounts of jobs involved in that. And then you're looking at other modern jobs in areas like electronics and pharmaceuticals, as we've mentioned already. Other types of industries that we find here, you've got traditional industries along the lines of food processing. You know, it's the European Union's biggest milk and cheese market. It's got 5 of the world's top 10 dairy companies here. Danone is a big French multinational dairy company. You've got ciders, breads, wine, champagne. All of these are traditional labor intensive industries. Other traditional industries include the printing and publishing industry. You've got 17 universities, big desire for reading and literature material. So you've got a lot of newspapers and printing and publishing houses here in Paris as well. And finally then weapons, you know, mentioned there, the aerospace industry is the fourth biggest weapons exporter in the world. Dassault would be one of the big manufacturing companies. Thales, they produce radars that would go on the jets and the war machines. So they would be, that's just a, you know, collection of the different types of industry that you'd expect to find in the Paris Basin. Cosmetic Valley, we've mentioned that already. Cosmetic Valley is where we find a lot of the cosmetics and perfumes. It's a really, really advanced type of industry. It's modern. You need to be well educated to work in them. A lot of these cosmetic companies have set up together in what we call Technopoles. Technopole is just another name for business park. Lots of research and development goes on in these technopoles, these business parks where these cosmetic companies set up. The Cosmetic Valley, which you can see there on the map, has about 800 companies in this kind of area region with 70,000 skilled and educated workers. And it's estimated that the Cosmetic Valley generates 11 billion a year in income. We'll go past this now. We won't do that because I'm not in. Of manufacturing, because manufacturing is not all rosy in the garden here. Paris is a high cost location, so in order to get around the fact that Paris is very, very expensive to live and set up and work in, industries are starting to move out of Paris. One example is Renault closing their factory, and in total manufacturing in Paris has halved since 1975. There are less factories there now than there was 25-35 years ago. The wealth in the region is not equally shared. Ile-de-France, or Paris, is the wealthiest, whereas some of the more rural areas, they don't experience the same type of wealth. Corporate tax in France is very, very high. It's about 12.5% in Ireland, but in France it's 33%. So that makes it very difficult to attract multinational companies and to compete with low-cost economies like Poland, for example. And a solution to some of these problems would be to decentralize jobs into places like the Cosmetic Valleys, build the science parks or business parks, again the technopoles like Cosmetic Valley, and to try and reduce urban sprawl. And we'll look at urban sprawl a little bit more when we come to talk about that in the development of an urban area. Sorry about that. This is the question then that you're going to be looking for tonight. Account for the development of manufacturing in a European region, not in Ireland, that you've studied. So again, you must link to a clearly named region. In this essay, I'm going to talk about the development of manufacturing in the Paris Basin. Okay, credit two examples of manufacturing. So you might talk about traditional industries like baking, or you might talk about something like pharmaceuticals or car assembly, whatever it might be. So for naming the first two, you get 4 marks. Credit factors for impacting manufacturing for 4 marks as well. So they would be things like your transportation, your energy, your raw materials, your labor force, whatever it might be. Okay. And next little one then, it can be a positive or negative. So you can say good things or bad things. You can put in a sketch map if you want, but you must link manufacturing to your factors. You must link it to the development, why it developed, where it did. So yeah, that's your work there for tonight, guys. And again, if anyone wants to PDF it into me using Adobe Scan, I'll correct it and send it back. But I am considering this covered now. Okay, so thanks very much, and we'll talk to you soon. Whoops. Oh, actually, we'll go with this one instead. It's more modern. It's more up to date. Okay, so account for the development. Oh no, okay. I put that slide up there separately. Let's see if I can reverse there. It doesn't seem to allow me to. Pause it and we'll go back.